All right, everyone. We are live with Mr. Troy Hellman, the marketing manager for Lacrosse Footwear. Dude, we are super excited to have you on. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, guys. I'm stoked to be here. Really excited for the opportunity and excited to chat some rubber boots, man.
Yeah, talk about rubbers in the boot sense. So
Yes.
Troy's a man of mystery. I was joking with him before we started recording. Typically, I know just about everything that the person's going to say before we get him on. But as a marketing manager, he is sworn off having any type of social media account personally. So I know just as much as the listener at this point. So this will be really fun to talk. So before we get into that and some of your background, I want to give a shout out to Pete Horn for hooking us up. Pete is our sales rep. He was at our Rut Daniels Catching Deers event that we had. What was that, been about a month ago, maybe at this
About
point?
a month now, yep.
And so Pete, if you're listening, man, thank you for hooking this up. He's a great dude and has helped me out with all my lacrosse purchases. So again, thank Pete. And yeah, man, let's go get into who is Troy and kind of a little bit about a background about yourself and then how you got started with lacrosse.
For sure. So to set the record straight, I do have an Instagram. It's just a burner account at this point.
There you go.
You were exactly right. I've sworn off like the personal side of social media. But I grew up hunting and fishing. I actually grew up in Virginia. Lacrosse is headquartered in Oregon and started in Lacrosse, Wisconsin, Midwest brand. But I feel like I truly grew up in the core market for lacrosse in a way. Had a pair of Granges as a kid, spring turkey hunting and, living in a tree stand hunting whitetail. And then as soon as college was over, I just had my sights set out west. My family's from the West originally. And so my wife and I ended up in Oregon and, this is kind of a hotbed for the outdoor industry in a way. We have a lot of brands here in the Pacific Northwest in general, and I knew I just wanted to kind of get myself proximal to it and figure out a way to get my foot in the door. And then, the added bonus of the fact that the hunting and fishing opportunity out here is endless. So
for sure.
That's kind of what stemmed that move and that decision. And I worked my way into the industry. Portland here is like the knife making capital of the US. It's the hotbed. And so I had worked my way into the knife industry. And then about 2 years ago, during the fall of 2020 with COVID, I had left my previous company and it was kind of perfect. I had a 3-month hiatus, where I didn't start right away at Lacrosse. They were kind of still working through some COVID hiring freezes and stuff like that. But I hunted elk season out here and then it was time to leave. And so October 1st, I was free for 3 months, arguably some of the best part of the year. So
yeah, no doubt.
I had just gotten a new waterfowl dog, picked up a new lab, and I got to spend 3 months just training and bonding and hunting blacktail. I flew home to Virginia and shot a whitetail buck with my dad. So it was a really special 3 months, and then being able to jump into lacrosse and start a new adventure with this legacy brand, this iconic brand in the footwear space. I think it's pretty wild to wrap your head around the fact that I'm sitting at this seat now within this company that's been rolling for 125 years. This is our 125th year in business. So, you're on the shoulders of some pretty serious people and some pretty successful, minds at the end of the day. So it's stressful, there's a bit of pressure with it, but it's also, it's an awesome challenge and one that I'm incredibly grateful for.
Oh, for sure. And like I told you before we started recording, man, you don't get to 125 years in business, especially in the footwear space, if you suck.
For sure.
So, 1897, my hat says it. We all know it. That was a long, long time ago, man. And so, like you said, now you're sitting here as a guy that wore the product as a kid growing up, and you're the face, if you will, of the company on the marketing side, and working with some incredible people in the industry and kind of putting all those minds together just to continue this, like you mentioned, like a legacy brand.
Yeah.
It's just like Lacrosse is the biggest name probably in footwear that I mean, in my opinion. And I couldn't imagine sitting there at the helm and being like the guy that has, you got the mouse in your hand, if you will, like you're the one that's pushing all the buttons per se. So congrats on that, dude, because that's a super cool accomplishment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's, I said it earlier, it's like terrifying at a certain point. It's like I'm just this kid from Virginia that loves hunting and fishing, and, here I am with all of this like phenomenal culture and like history in my hands. And I think like as a marketer, it's our job to figure out how we maintain that core. What's got us here? Like what's our DNA as a brand, and how do we apply that in a way that allows us to continue to grow and continue to evolve and shift with our consumer as our consumer gets older, as our consumer gets younger. Like it's my job, I feel like, to protect that history and to make sure that people are cognizant of that history as they come deeper into the fold of our brand. So
yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I mean, I was in the finance world before coming here, and again, similar boat. The company that I was with was founded in 1918, and so it's like, especially in the banking world, it's like, how do you see like where you're coming from? I mean, and then continue to evolve with today's trends. How do you take a company that was founded in 1897 and now you have a TikTok account? You know what I mean? Like that not that you do, but like how do you wrap that around? Because you have both sides of the spectrum. I mean, we have the same thing here. We have a lot of customers that have shopped with Vance or Buck Outdoor forever. Forever. I mean, as a company that's been around for 84 years this year, we're in the same boat. Here's this company that's been here for 84 years. Okay, well, how do we continue to market to people in the world where they can get anything they want on demand, 2-hour delivery from Amazon? How do we keep them coming in the stores? How do we keep them buying the product? Like, how do we keep them involved in the outdoors? And so it's definitely an incredible challenge, and it's one that we're blessed to be able to do for sure. So
Troy, how big is the team there that you manage? And do you guys do a lot of outsourcing for the content, or is that mostly in-house?
Yeah, so we're structured in an interesting way. So Lacrosse, Danner, and White's Boots all fall under the same umbrella. So there are a lot of shared roles internally in our company, people that do their same job for both brands. As both brands are really starting to swing and grow, I think that time is going to be less and less, or that dynamic is going to be less and less common. We're really going to need to start breaking people off and letting them like specialize on specific brands. So our marketing team is about like 15 people, I'd say, give or take. And then we do outsource the majority of our creative. We work very closely with an agency here locally. And then prior to my time here, we had already had this like very established stable of freelancers that are still on, they're some of the best. We've talked about Justin Michaud, arguably one of my favorite humans, let alone creators in this space.
Yeah, for sure.
And we've just been super blessed to maintain those relationships with those types of people. And it's brought us a lot of joy and, a lot of success, and it's been integral. Like guys like Justin have been integral in what we have coming forward. 23 is going to be this very pinnacle moment of change for Lacrosse. And I think like many brands, we've kind of had to pump the brakes on a lot of plans and things over the last couple of years, as we've worked through this like upside down world of manufacturing and supply chains and consumer demand and stuff. And so it's really cool to take these people that have been a part of the brand, 8-10 years, well before I ever joined, and continue to walk side by side with them into this like new chapter for Lacrosse. So yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so, as you talk about this new chapter, let's go ahead and go back a little bit. I'm going to test your lacrosse history knowledge. So, if you want to, I'll give you like 2 seconds to go ahead and pull up the website so you can do the timeline. Okay, cool. If there's like a chief marketing officer or CMO there, he'll be. I see the screen lighting up on this thing. Here we go.
Yep.
I'm just messing with you.
We're ready.
I'm just messing for you. So, like I mentioned earlier, and you had said as well, 125 years. They were founded in 1897.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go ahead and dive into just that incredible history and kind of where Lacrosse as a company got its start in terms of like what kind of products were they making. Were they making boots right off the rip, or were they more into developing some rubber technology? Like, let's get into that conversation a little bit, and then how that progressively changed as it went through.
Yeah. So originally, obviously, we got the name from Lacrosse, Wisconsin, and we weren't cranking boots out right out of the gate. That wasn't our deal. I think there were some rubber horseshoes in there, some rubber overshoes in there, and it kind of bounced around a little bit, and then eventually worked our way into like footwear, traditional rubber footwear at the time. And it's cool to think like my degree in college was in history, and I'm obviously not doing anything with it now, being a marketer.
Yeah,
but through the last 2 years, we're like, the world's crazy, COVID's crazy, like everything's popping off, it feels like. But then you look back on the timeline of this brand, and then like we were cranking boots out in World War II, for
exactly
folks deploying. Thus 1897, like we were around for World War I. And so Great Depression, like this company has seen it all, in the modern era. And it's easy to feel like what we're going through right now is this like massive, insane world is ending type thing at certain points in time. But when you look at the past history of what this brand's seen, it's like, it's a blip on the radar at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah.
So, from there, getting into like the 50s is when we dropped the Grange, and that is still like one of our top selling boots. It's one of my personal favorites. It's like, it's a tennis shoe, it's no frills, super straightforward. It's just a all around good boot. And I love
mine.
Yeah. We jokingly call it like the unofficial boot of turkey season, but I wear that boot like all year long. And so that green rubber, that we call it like green and yellow rubber. It's like Grange, Burley, anything we do in that colorway. We've got hip waders, in that same colorway. That to me is like the iconic snapshot of lacrosse, like modern lacrosse footwear. So that Grange, one of the things that was so special about it is like our rubber compound. We're built off quality. Like our biggest thing is quality. And so we don't, cut corners on what we do in terms of the material, the production processes. Like we want to build a good boot that becomes a generational thing. You think back to like my grandfather wore a pair of Granges, I might not be wearing his Granges, but like my dad wore them. I'm going to wear them. It's just like, it's this iconic generational kind of like visual in my eyes. And so that to me is super special. And a big thing that you guys have probably felt, even in our modern footwear that we saw with that Grange, is like the ankle fit. That was a big thing for people, in which we have a more form fit or like athletic feeling shaft at the base of that ankle, so that you don't get that traditional rubber boot heel slip and slop. And I think that is a large part of what makes our boots super comfortable. Like you shouldn't be able to walk as far in rubber boots as you can with a lot of different styles that we have. And it's been pretty shocking to me to live that firsthand, to like experience it, to say, hey, the only thing I've got in my truck right now is a pair of rubbers, like now Burley Pro. I've got a trail cam that's been sitting in the woods for like 3 years, and I'm out here right now. I'm going to go, rip 3-4 miles from the truck in some pretty tough country and go pick that camera up. Hope it's still there. So
and I remember when we first had our conversation when you came back from your trip to Alaska. We were talking, and I was telling you how I also have a pair of Granges, and this was my first year running them. And I think Curtis and I, who we've had on the podcast, we turkey hunted this year, and I bet you I put like 4 miles on them in that one opening day for turkey. Excuse me. And my feet weren't swollen. They weren't sore. Like, I mean, now granted, I'm not hiking the hills of the mountains of Oregon, but at the same time, like Southern Ohio, as you know, can get kind of steep and
For
kind
sure.
of some kind of rocky and not rocky, but kind of just steep terrain, especially with power line cuts and what have you. And so, the best part, and I joked about this when we were talking on the phone, but the best part was finding that creek like halfway through the hike and just standing in it for like 10 minutes, just letting the rubber get cold and letting my feet have a little bit of an air conditioning. So
Yeah.
that was pretty awesome too. But yeah, man, it's cool to see that, essentially I'm wearing the same exact boot that, like you mentioned, like your grandfather wore. Materials change and designs change and things like that happen. But, that's one that's just kind of timeless and it's stood the test of time. So,
Yeah, I honestly, like, we're always developing new stuff. We're playing with new things. I am lucky to get a lot of those samples before they're released just to test, because I'm out there. I spend just as much time outside as I do sitting here on the computer. And so, that all to be said, like, I think I reach for my Granges more than anything. Like, they're nothing fancy, nothing crazy technologically speaking. We've got crazy stuff, and I feel like those Grange are on my feet more times than not.
yeah. And as a whitetail guy, like, too, for me, like, if the weather, I mean, if it's cold, I'm getting into my arrowheads, which we'll talk about. But outside of that, like, it's nice to be able to wear a rubber, because especially, as you know, like, back behind the house, it's really swampy in this little area that I have. And I couldn't wear just a normal lace-up boot. By the time you're calf deep into some muck. So it's like I have this rubber that it's good for that situation where I need it to be a creek crossing or crossing a river or getting into some swampy material. But then have the profile and the narrowness that I can stealthily, and I'm using air quotes because, I'm not the most well-off stalker, if you will, but just not to sit there and trounce through the woods and make all sorts of ruckus like you would if you were wearing a bigger rubber boot or more of like a boot that's more like the Alpha Burley Pro or like something a little bit heavier, a little bit clunkier. So that, to me, it's just like, until my feet are too cold to the part where I can't wear them anymore, that's just like, that's a ticket for me. So
Yeah.
I know you have, which ones do you have you have the lace ups, right, Ben?
I have the Windrose.
The Windrose?
Yeah. And I love those with the Gore-Tex and everything. And I wore those back the same place you were just talking
Yeah.
about. And they were awesome. My feet didn't get wet at all. But
Yeah.
I think it was drier when we walked back through there. I definitely didn't sink. But
Yeah. There's a couple spots it gets like mid calf deep and you're like slumping through, but it but like you said though, for having something that's
I've
water
walked
resistant.
through creeks with them and
Yeah,
stuff. And
exactly.
that's what I use for early season, those Windrose boots, and I love them. I've had them
Yeah.
for 2 seasons now.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, the Windrose it's a leather lace-up boot of ours.
Yep.
There's
Yeah.
a lot
Yep.
of people that think Lacrosse, and they're like, they just make rubber boots, waterfowl waders. But we definitely do make, a decent selection of leather lace-up footwear. And I think, like, what you'll see in the future from us is more of that, like starting to push that envelope. We're not giving up on rubber by any means. Like, we're still full steam ahead on that stuff. But I think there's an appetite for us to take the same philosophy on, that we apply to our rubber product and start to just like take that experience in footwear and start applying it around our assortment or our offerings. And I deviated from the timeline of the brand on you guys a little bit there. So we hit the Grange, that's just traditional, like rubber top to bottom. I think where you really start to see things change and modernize in the rubber footwear space is when we started applying rubber over neoprene. So you have your neoprene booty, it's full tip to tail neoprene, and then that hand laid, that rubber is hand laid over it. And so you get the flexibility and the comfort, and there's some naturally insulating properties of neoprene as well, added with the durability and the form of that rubber shell or rubber outer. So we've had all of these different iterations of boots, like, the Alpha Burley Pro. I think it started as just like the Burley Pro or the Burley Sport. I can't remember all the names off the top of my head, but the Alpha Burley Pro has really grown into our like pinnacle product on the rubber footwear side of things. And
for sure.
I think that what you see a lot of with that boot is, it's a beefier mid and outsole. It's chunkier. It's got better traction than pretty much anything else, like compared to a Grange.
Yep.
But some people don't want that. Like some people don't want a heavier boot. They want something simple. They want something to feel like a slipper, which is essentially what that Grange is in my eyes. But that really started to crack that rubber over neoprene technology is really what started to kind of crack things wide open for us. So anytime that you see the prefix essentially alpha on a product of ours, it's hand laid rubber over neoprene. And then right at the beginning of the 2000s, I believe, we introduced our Aero technology. And Aero, I think, is like one of the most slept on technologies that we have. We're the only brand that can do it, and it's essentially polyurethane over neoprene. So instead of that rubber, we're adding a lighter, more flexible, and essentially more insulating material. Like polyurethane is a non-conductive composite, so you're not like bleeding heat out of the bottom of your foot when you're standing on a tree stand and it's 10 below or whatever. So what you won't see in our Aero, any of our Aero products, is like Thinsulate, with an Alpha Burley Pro and just footwear in general, especially like whitetail space. We're always looking like, is it 1,200 grams? Is it 800 grams? Is it 1,600 grams? You're never going to see that in the Aero space. And I think it turns a lot of people off because they're so attuned to that Thinsulate rating. The reality of it is that like you're going to get a slimmer, lighter, more flexible boot out of an Aero product that's going to insulate darn close to a 1,200 or 1,600 gram
Thinsulate material.
Thinsulate package. So
I have a pair. Of course, we're a stone's throw away from the Rocky Boot Factory from here in Ohio, and I mean they make a great quality product. We're not here to talk about them, but essentially what I'm doing is comparing it. So I had a pair of 800 gram Thinsulate boots because again, I think I bought these things when I was in high school or just out of high school, and I still have them today. A couple 20 years ago, it's when you're in this whitetail space, everyone, like you just mentioned, everyone's like, is it 1,600 gram? Is it 800 gram? 1,200 gram? Is no insulation at all? Like it's just what everyone talks about. And so when I picked up my Arrowheads with the introduction of Spectre, because you got to match your gear. So my first light, pattern and everything. And we had talked a little bit about this before too, but we were comparing. You remember we were trying to figure out, okay, so it's 7.5 millimeter neoprene. Like, how does that match up with the Thinsulate? Like, so I can compare it to what kind of boot I'm getting.
I think that's where Pete came in too.
Yeah,
right? You asked Pete what the comparison was.
Yeah, exactly. And like you had mentioned too, like that Aeroform technology, like it is an extremely light boot for how much insulation I get out of it. Like I will sweat in that thing. I mean, and I didn't know that either. You had mentioned, especially as like tree stand guys, like it not having any type of is it conductive or like the loss of heat through the sole.
Correct.
That's huge too, because as we're standing on our platforms or we're standing on our tree stands or whatever have you, like that's a huge thing, and it's something to take in consideration.
Yeah, and some guys, like again, people are so accustomed to seeing Thinsulate packages. It's like I see it in Western boots out here, like Western mounting hunting boots. Guys are like, it's got Gore-Tex, check. It's a Vibram outsole, check. Like, I'm it, And I think we do the same thing in the whitetail space when it comes to insulation packages, depending on your region, your style of hunting, and the time of season that you're generally out there. Whether you're an early season guy, some guys even chasing velvet, all the way through to your states that run, in and through January. So I think with like the 7 mil neoprene Aero stuff that we were talking about, that's the thickest neoprene boot that we're going to run on Aero. You've got 7 and you've got 3.5. That 7 and the profile of that 7 mil arrowhead compared to what would be comparable in a Thinsulate, it's like, it makes the Thinsulate stuff look like a moon boot almost. Like a 1,600 grand
really,
boot is massive. I think it's like,
they really do.
Great on waterfowl waders because you're not worried about being articulate and like sliding your feet into climbing sticks, or if you still got a climber stand, whatever. And so it's a slimmer profile. I mean, you look at our stable of guys that we either sponsor or work with or whatever, and some of the best guys that we've got in the whitetail space are running the Arrowhead exclusively, and they have been for years. I keep trying to throw like new Alpha Burley Pros at them and stuff like that, and every time the content comes out the following season, it's Arrowheads, which is great. It's cool, but I think, like, broadly speaking, it's slept on.
Oh, for sure. And you had mentioned that to me before when we had talked, and I think where the Burleys are coming into play is, like, especially if you're just maybe you're blind hunting, or you have a quick, easy transition into like a nice ladder stand. There's really not, I mean, they definitely have the insulation there. Like, I wouldn't like stray away from, like, when we get into January and February, like especially here, like I think that might be something that I gravitate towards just because of that static insulation. But then, and it doesn't matter what you're wearing at that point. You're crunching snow, you know what I mean? And so it's like, you might as well just get the warmth that you can. But, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how to get more from your boot as well, because you're just not going to, I don't give it up too much, but you're not just going to buy that boot, slap it on a pair of Hanes socks and walk out the door and like feel like you're going to get the best product, which we'll talk about more in depth and how people can maximize that. But like I said, man, like those Arrowheads, like right now for me, when it's dipping into those 40s and 50s and I have the appropriate footwear on, it's perfect, especially when you're trying to crunch through some leaves and stuff right now too. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's almost a great segue into foot systems, unless you want to take it a different direction.
There's a couple other things I want to touch on, one more thing, and then we'll dive into that. I don't want to forget this because I feel like it's really important.
Hit me.
So we live in an area, we had mentioned turkeys, and we live in an area specifically here where we have a lot of business in agriculture. Especially with just farming in general. And then I know you guys have it was on the website, I just found out this morning actually, but you give back to the community a lot in different ways, and you're partnered with a lot of unique brands. Can you kind of touch on that? I know you're partnered with FFA as well as NWTF. So that's awesome to see that a company that benefits from people that are in this industry using their product, giving back to them. Can you kind of touch on what you guys do for those organizations? Yeah,
for sure. I think, to be totally candid, I feel like we never do enough. It's like it could be a full-time job just like engaging with our like partnerships in that way. I think we do a great job at engaging with them and like bringing value to those specific organizations that are then bringing value to their respective communities. But we have been partnered up with FFA at the national level for a long time. And a lot of what we do with FFA is specifically support like their Give the Gift of Blue program, in which we basically finance the blue jackets for kids. And then we also work with them on a scholarship fund as well for the kids that get selected or picked based off FFA's criteria. Same deal, like we take a portion of our budget and help apply that to these kids, college funds. And I think it's wildly important because it's not like a dying breed, but it's like we've watched the shift in farming, both at small scale and obviously what we're seeing at larger scale here. And I think it's something that's wildly important. It's like it's what this country was built off of, and
for sure.
It's a large portion of who made us who we are. That demographic is like who supported lacrosse and allowed us to be in business for 125 years. And so I think it's wildly important for us to maintain that relationship and protect that future. Like, we've got to sell boots to keep the lights on at the end of the day. But I think if brands can start to shift and think about how they use their platforms to affect change and affect good in their space, it might be a little sliver of the world, but like, I feel so much better if I can lay my head down on the pillow at the end of the night and know that I'm doing more than just cramming social ads down people's throats and looking for influencers to give codes and stuff like that. It just, that stuff doesn't do it for me. And so these relationships, things like FFA, we've been with NWTF for a long time. National Deer Association is a relatively new partnership for us. This is year 2. And then Delta Waterfowl. So I think, you know, we've really effectively rounded out the best of the best in our eyes for our individual categories as a brand. And I want to see that grow. You know, I want to see us add more to that roster and do more with those pre-existing partners. The NWTF partnership is a super cool one in the sense of we've got collaborative NWTF product where we've basically created this trifecta collaboration between ourselves, Mossy Oak, and NWTF. So we've got a pair of Bottomland Granges that are specifically NWTF branded. So, you know, we take a portion of proceeds from those specific licensed products and give that to NWTF annually. We added 2 new NWTF styles to the line this last year. We had a rubber snake boot and a leather snake boot. So those are ways in which we like continue to try and help that cause, more or less.
Yeah, no, sure.
And I think that the true evolution of those relationships for a long time, it's like you shake hands at ATA, you know, you sign your contract for the year, and it's like, cool, man, like, see you in January.
Yeah.
And so I think as you watch this like younger generation come into seats of power at brands, you're starting to see this evolution of like, how do we do more than that? Like, how do we put our money where our mouth is? How do we walk the walk just as much as we're talking about it, you know? And so I think that is really, like, as a marketer, that's where my eyes are focused for our next phase, on that partnership side of things. But it's something that brings immense joy to my day. And we just need more hours in the day, you know, more than anything, to really like nurture these relationships the way they deserve to be nurtured.
All right, everyone, we need to take a quick break from our conversation with Troy to thank our sponsor, Toby Burdett, with Burdett Taxidermy and Legends Big Game Recovery. It's officially November, and the rut is starting to heat up, and moments come at you fast this time of year. Well, and sometimes bad shots just happen. If you're in Ohio or the surrounding states and you find yourself in a situation where you need help tracking, give them a call at 740-281-6435. Thanks, everyone. Good luck this hunting season. Now let's get back into the conversation. I feel the same way too. You know, as much as we can give back, you know, we've done a little bit here, not as much as I would like to see, quite frankly. But you know, these people buy your product. These people come in your stores. These people do this, and it's just like it feels good to help causes, helping other people continue to pursue the passion, because everything that we're doing is recreational. Like, we don't have to do any of this stuff,
right?
You know, and so it's cool to be able to help these organizations continue to bring more advocacy, if you will, into what we do, whether it's hunting, fishing, shooting, archery, doesn't matter what it is. I think it's super sweet to do that. So so let's get back in. So we were kind of segueing a little bit too. As a, how do I want to say this, Ben? As someone that's, let's do like a how-to, if you will. So
sure.
We mentioned
build a system.
Yeah. So we mentioned a little bit earlier, kind of like how to get the most out of your boot, right? So how can we take this Alpha Burley Pro, this Arrowhead Sport, and get colder temperatures? You know, what is it? Outstay your prey, right? That's your guys' tagline right now. Outstay your prey. See, I get bonus points for knowing that.
Yeah, marketing's working.
Right? Hashtag, this is the name of the podcast episode. But how do we outstay the prey and get this Arrowhead Sport 7mm boot from a relative range of, let's say, in the 40s with some cotton socks on, which you probably shouldn't, to down to 0 degrees? Like, what can I do as a hunter to benefit the most from that insulation that you're providing?
It's a great question, and it's one that I was like a victim to abusing, I guess, or like I wasn't educated, and I think technology's changed even in my
Yep.
short lifetime since I was a kid, and specifically technology around fabrics and like what's next to skin. And I think that we see a lot of it in the Western space. Like I was kind of catapulted into learning and understanding how to really take care of your feet, in particular in the Western space. And that's kind of like broken it wide open for me as I understand, you know, my like nostalgic or historic pursuits of whitetail and turkey. And so I think a lot of people, they buy a big rubber boot, you know, it's got all this crazy technology and features and insulation and stuff like that. And they're like, well, you know, I'm just run the same socks I wear to the gym, or maybe
Yep,
a pair of
exactly.
darn toughs or something like that. And the thought process kind of like ends and dies there. And I think that
Yep.
the symbol of any truly like functional footwear system is signified when you get to your truck at the end of the day and you realize you haven't thought about your feet once. You know, like I think that's a great move. And so first off for me is early season. Like I kind of run this early and late season. If I'm running rubbers in, let's say the summer, like we're getting our duck lease dialed in, corn's getting planted, we're out there, you know, moving stuff around, getting blinds ready. I'm wearing a pair of Granges and it's 80, 90 degrees, you know? And so it sounds counterintuitive, but what I like to do is run a super thin merino sock liner. And you can do synthetic too. You know, I think that merino does better in warmer scenarios, which kind of seems counterintuitive. You think wool, you think warmer, but I prefer to run like a merino, super thin merino liner, and then a lightweight merino sock over top of that. And again, it feels insane. Like my feet run hot to begin with. But that system, just like your clothing system, wicks moisture away from the skin. It gets it off the foot and into that outer layer of the sock. We do have certain boots that have what we call air circ technology, and it's basically like a perforated like mesh liner that helps give better airflow to the foot and not just press a flat material and increase surface area on your skin or your sock. Not every boot has air circ, but the ones that do, like you see them a lot in our outdoor space, specifically, you know, like stuff that we've designed for agricultural use around the farm, so on and so forth. We've got it in a handful of hunt product too, but that liner sock system is super important. And then to your point of increasing warmth as we transition out of those early season months is increasing the thickness or durometer basically of that external sock. So you might go from a lightweight to a mid or a heavy, but maintaining that sock liner against the skin as your barrier or your flow of moisture away from the skin there. So that is like, it takes some trial and error. Everybody's foot sweats differently. Everybody's running different boots in different climates. So it might take a little bit of like bump and turn navigation. And what I did when I was starting to figure that stuff out is I'd just buy like, you know, I bought like a synthetic liner, I bought a merino liner off Amazon, and then I did like a light, a mid, and a heavyweight sock, and just did one of everything and would start to play around and mix and match. And it takes nothing to carry an extra sock in your pack if you're going to be away from the truck all day and you want to swap out. So I would do that and then kind of figure out my system, and then I'd buy like 10 of those, you know, outer socks or whatever. So you're ready, you know, it's nice too. Like a lot of the times with rubber, if I've got a longer hike into a stand or something, let's say I'm doing a hanging hunt on public, or I just want to go get in deep on like hunting blacktail late season out here. And I've got a good hike to get into where I'm going to hang a stand, I'll bring a second set of socks. And like the first thing that I do when I'm hanging sticks or whatever is I'll kick that boot off real fast, strip the external sock, knowing that I sweat a lot, get that outer layer out, throw it in a Ziploc bag. It's in my pack. I'm up the tree with a fresh pair of socks on, and I'm ready to party for however long. So, that's generally how I go about doing things. I did kind of get like schooled to the Bama Sockettes, which is probably like a no-no to talk about as a
we had talked
lacrosse
about
guy.
those, right?
Dude, you can't argue
You
with.
should just make some.
I know. So we were up in Alaska a couple weeks ago, doing a blacktail hunt on Kodiak, and we were living on a boat for essentially just over a week. And while we were up there, we're looking at rubber footwear. Alaskans like live in rubber footwear for the most part, especially if you're in the Southeast. And so a lot of those guys were talking about these Bama Sockettes, and basically it's that concept of a layered system against your sock, against your foot. And the Bama Sockettes help wick moisture and increase warmth and insulation purely in the foot, not running all the way up the ankle and the shaft there. But you see it a lot with like commercial fishermen, that are wearing rubber boots on as like deck boots, more or less. And then a lot of like waterfowl guys. As I've kind of like dug into it since that conversation in Alaska, I've noticed, guys in Nodak, guys like across the upper Midwest that are hunting insanely cold waterfowl temps, running a socket in addition to, a pair of waders that's got a 1,600 gram boot on it, so.
Yeah, I'm excited. I picked some up on Amazon. Taylor, I don't know if I even told you, but I went hunting with Taylor on our pro staff team, and he's wearing what's that? Is it an extra tough boot? Is that who's like making them, the Sockets? But like the extra tough.
Yeah.
Like
I think it is extra tough.
Yeah, they look like commercial fishing boots. Yeah. And so he's big into his Granges and big into his Alpha Burleys and stuff. And he's like, I'm like, dude, what are you pulling out? They look like a miniature like moving blanket, like blue, like this. It's like really weird looking thing.
It looks like something they give you in the hospital.
Yeah, exactly. And, or I've seen guys like put these like extra layer of this like little, like, especially if they're like doing spot and stocks and they're like throwing on this. Oh, somebody's calling me.
Yeah, the little like stalker slippers.
Yeah. Like stalker slippers. Yeah, like you're getting ready to throw in these little stalker slippers. Like, who comes to mind is Sam Davis comes to mind. Like he throws on an additional sock or whatever to kind of just help prevent from briars or whatever thorny bush is trying to eat his feet. And I'm like, dude, like we're just walking to the stand. Like it's not that big. He's like, oh, dude, these are legit. Like you need to get some. Like they like pull the moisture away and they're like perfect. Like do you run yours with like the socket, if you will, over top of the actual merino blend, or do you run it underneath?
I will run it. I've run it both ways, and to be honest, like I'm still super new into the socket side of things, and we really haven't had the temps to truly put it through its paces. But I haven't felt a big difference yet, either one way or the other. I also haven't done any research to see like how I should be doing it.
Sure.
So
it's just all gonna be a matter of preference for sure.
I think that's it.
I'm like super excited to try them as we get in. Hopefully if I'm hunting, I'm like taking pictures for other people and I'm not hunting myself. But I'm like super excited to try those because, running those with like the Alpha Burleys or running those with my arrowheads or something like that, it's going to be pretty clutch. I mean, and you're right in the sense, like going back to just how they benefit from this, as growing up, and I'm sure you were the same way. We're like, oh, let's go down to the Rocky store, hour and a half away, and let's get some 1,600 gram or 800 gram. And I'm throwing my regular Hanes cotton socks on it. And I'm like, why are my feet always cold? And and I just think it was just people just didn't know. I mean, we're talking 15, 20 years ago, like merino is starting to have this like insurgency, if you will, of just like, and maybe it's been around and we just don't know about it, but it's like, it's becoming more mainstream now, I think, like layering, whether you're using a First Light system or you're using Sitco or you're running something else that's more synthetic, like an Under Armour system or whatever have you, like this like layering and changing stuff out. Like you would have asked me 15 years ago on a hunting trip, like, hey, you should change your socks out when you're in the tree stand. I would have never have brought in extra socks. I would just assume the fact that I just have cold feet.
Yeah.
Like, and now, like, especially after we just talked with Greg too, okay, I'm getting in the stand at 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning for an all day rut sit. I'm bringing at least 1 or 2 extra pairs of socks with me so I can switch them out halfway through and change that out. Or, here I am just the other day walking to the stand Andrew was like, hey, like, why didn't you have your jacket on? Why didn't you have why are your bibs always zipped down? And it's like, I'm trying to like get rid of all that moisture, because the moisture is what's actually making this cold. People may have warmer feet than what they even really expect to think that they do.
For sure.
And this goes back to, I mean, take hunting out of it. Like, how many times have you sat through like a football game on a Friday night and your feet are freezing, or you're doing something else. It's not even necessarily hunting related, and you're like, man, my feet are cold. Well, like, take a look at what you're putting on them.
Yeah, I think that you're right. I think technology has advanced significantly in like 15, 20 years. And we really, like, you'd seen it in the mountaineering space, like, and technical outerwear was like light years ahead of what we were getting in the hunt world. I mean, as a kid, I was wearing like a Vincelet, coverall, zip up coverall. If I take a dunk in a creek or something like that, my day's over. Like, I'm toast, and now to get to this point, I'd be wearing a cotton t-shirt underneath and like cotton SpongeBob boxers under that. And so
dude,
like
100%.
as you get older,
100%.
Now realizing like how much intricacy there is to it. And I feel like, I hunt archery season a lot for elk out here. So it's t-shirt weather for the most part, you get your occasional snowstorms and whatnot, but like the layering side of things is pretty easy. It's like light and fast. You might throw a vest on or a puffy on in the morning until you get rolling. But like as soon as you start hiking, I sweat like a pig. And as soon as I get hiking, I'd rather be cold at the trailhead, for the first 15 minutes of the day while I'm running the jet boil or whatever on the back of the truck. Because I know as soon as I start moving, I'm going to start pumping sweat. And a lot of the times I'll bring a second, like base layer hoodie type deal, so that when we get up into the spot and we're done kind of like grinding to get in that first shot, I can just swap out. And I learned that like in spades on Kodiak. I hate wearing rain gear. I like living in Western Oregon. I just don't wear it. We just are accustomed to getting wet, but you don't have that luxury on Kodiak. Like you have to stay dry, you have to stay warm. And so I was really battling with both like my footwear and like my apparel system, trying to find that perfect balance. Like it's back to that like bump and turn navigation that I was talking about earlier. And different climates, different hunts, different environments will require different systems. It's as much as I want to be like a one size fits all. I built this system. It runs for me in my like prime environment. I can apply it everywhere else. It's not the case. And the same thing applies to footwear. Like people slip into this mentality that you can just like run the same pair of socks and the same pair of boots for every different thing. And what we're starting to see a lot of now is like guys are so specialized in what they look for in footwear that they're saving like, my AB Pro is whitetail in a tree stand. My Grange is this. At the end of the day, like guys will have like 3 different pairs of boots for 3 different types of pursuits. And we understand that. And we try to build boots that are as like universally applicable as we can. But there's also times where our product team narrows that aperture and says, this boot is for a very particular person, and we're going to build it out to the best of our ability to meet those very specific demands in a way that delivers like truly pinnacle product,
Yep. So if my wife is listening, I'm sorry that I have 5 different pairs of boots.
that like argument in my household got flipped on its head as soon as I jumped into footwear, because I was like, I got 1 pair of boots for everything kind of guy. And when I started working in footwear, it's like, well, now I can't clap back at her and be like, how many pairs of shoes do you have in the closet? Because I've got more, and they're huge,
more expensive.
Like, they're massive. They're taking up a lot more room than a pair of heels, So
that's awesome. That's where all of mine have to stay in the garage. And if I get them out of place, I'll hear about it. I promise you. I promise you. So we kind of touched in on Kodiak a little bit. I mean, that was some great insight as to just the boot world, and again, it's before we get to what you have going on, it's just so cool to see how things transition from the mountaineering world or whatever have you into the Western. It always seems like whatever works for the Western slowly migrate its way over to the whitetail world, because it's just a different tactic, and it's things slowly. And I tell you, the sooner you're a whitetail guy and you pick up on what the Western guys are doing, the much better you're gonna be.
Now that you said that, it reminded me of a post that I saw on Instagram last year, and it was somebody got some OP booties, they're like the insulated booties that you would use in like a camp setting.
Oh yeah, yep.
And he put those on over his boots in the tree stand.
Yeah.
Just to try it out, and he said it was like oven. Like he didn't have to worry about anything. It was almost too much to have those on.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just kind of bringing that back in. Like you wouldn't know to do that, and he just probably saw it somewhere and like, hey, I'm going to try this out and see what it does.
Yeah, and it's all about being out there and being in the field, right? So whatever works for you to quote unquote outstay your prey. I mean, I'm just keep throwing that tagline in all day.
I love it. Get as much mileage out of it as you want.
There you go. But it's true though. This is you're only helping yourself by continuing to tinker and continuing to find out what best works for you. And like I said, as soon as a whitetail guy picks up on what the Western guys are doing, then let them do all the trial and error, man. And then their temperatures are just as cold as ours. It's a different environment, but you gotta do what you gotta do.
And I think it goes both ways. Like, to carry on that concept to a bit, like, I feel like I have my feet in both camps very effectively, like East and West. I know you guys had Bo on recently, and I think that's kind of, his brand in a way. But I think that the West side of things can get painted as this like elitist, like we know better than everybody type of vibe. And there's plenty of people that do it. I'd be the first to admit. But I think that there's a lot that I've taken from my childhood, and applied here, and been successful with it, and I think that's a really important soundbite for people to remember. Like, there's plenty of stuff whitetailers are doing that applies and could be a game changer for guys out West. Like, I tend to see it a lot with like Roosevelts and blacktail. Roosevelt elk are far more territorial. They're not as nomadic. They don't have 5,000 feet of elevation range in the season. And so looking at a lot of patterning tactics that I used to apply to whitetailing, I see in spades with Roosevelts and even blacktail to a degree.
Yeah.
That's one small example of how West can take from East, but I think a lot of it too can trend into apparel, now that we've seen this greater awareness around better footwear, better outerwear, what's working for guys that are having to sit still for 8 hours for a rut sit. I very rarely am standing still or still in any way, shape, or form, during archery elk season out here, but those times do come. Later seasons, if you got a rifle tag out here, there's plenty of times where you're sitting still and you've got to figure out what you need to do to maximize that time, maximize that opportunity, and keep yourself comfortable. Again, getting back to the concept of I've had a successful product, we've delivered a successful product. That person makes it back to the truck at the end of the day and didn't think about their feet once.
Exactly.
I think that is super important. So.
And that's a great quote. That's a great quote, and that's definitely a great leg to stand on. If it's something I'm not thinking about, then it's something that's worked. And so when you get to the point where you're hunting Roosevelts and saddles like Eric Chesser, then we'll say that the whitetails is successfully taken over, right?
We were talking about it yesterday. I was talking with a friend. We were hunting blacktail. We were rifle hunting yesterday, and we were talking about how many guys are starting to run stands for elk, and it's late season blacktail here. We have a late season archery tag that generally coincides with peak rut, and that's one of the best ways to hunt them is out of a tree stand if you can be okay with just getting soaking wet.
Sure.
It's definitely a thing out here. But yeah, it's super interesting to see the similarities in that sense.
Yeah, I wouldn't know if I'd be taking my summit climber on like an elk excursion, but
Plenty of
something
guys doing
lightweight.
it. Plenty of
Yeah,
guys
yeah,
doing it. And like,
yeah. That's wild.
and we see it out east too. Like we've noticed this trend in like leather footwear, like you're running, Ben, in the windrows. You know, a lot of guys are becoming more mobile. They're going in deeper. They've got lighter stands. You know, maybe they're saddle guys. Maybe they're just hanging sticks kind of guy. But you know, they're traipsing in there a couple miles, and they want to run, especially if it's early season. Like they're gonna run a pair of like basically Western mountain boots, you know, and stay comfortable, stay light on their feet. Got to be a little more mindful on creek crossings and stuff like that, but it's all stuff we face out here just the same. So we've noticed that trend, and I think that's like an interesting position that we have at Lacrosse is we're so connected to that like Midwest, Southeast, Northeast consumer that a lot of the Western like technical leather footwear brands aren't connected to in a way that we have a little more flexibility to like tell that story and engage with that market in a way. And so, you know, it's not like we're looking to like ramp up leather and just turn a blind eye to the East with it. It's a really cool creative unlock in my eyes as to like how we blend those worlds and how we show the similarities between each other. Because if you spend any time on Instagram looking at the hunt troll accounts, there's like a very distinct line in the sand between East versus West, and I don't really think that's the case as much as it might be portrayed to be.
There you go. Well, I'll just have to bring my Granges out when I finally do get drawn for muleys or goats in Wyoming. I'll just bring my Granges.
Good luck, man. I ran around Eastern Oregon for turkey in a pair of Granges this spring, and it was like pretty tough country, and I was blown away as to how well they did. You know, like we were specifically
awesome.
out there to shoot some content for the Grange, and we ended up just having to get into tougher country than we anticipated based off where the birds were, and I didn't bring anything else, you know, and I was a little cold a couple mornings. Like we had some when I shot my bird, his beard was all frosted up. So it was cold, but yeah, those Granges just crushed. It was impressive. And like, I've also, one thing that I should have brought up while we were talking systems and footwear is a lot of people sleep on footbeds and orthotics, like insoles, basically aftermarket insoles. Yeah. Huge shout out to Caleb at Sheep Feet. They are making wild orthotics that are custom molded for your foot, and they're out west. They're in Utah, but we've worked with them a little bit, and I've been running their stuff in my waterfowl boots, like in the boots of my waterfowl waders. And I'm not saying you need to spend $300 on a pair of custom orthotics for your waterfowl waders or your boots, but I can say now from firsthand experience, like when you're standing on a platform in the blind for 6 hours, you know, it makes a world of difference.
I'll have to check that out for sure, because that's something I don't ever really think about either. So I mean, that's definitely a good takeaway nugget for sure. Mm-hmm. We had talked about Kodiak, and I know you're coming up our way here before too long for some product stuff. What's the rest of your 2022-23 season looking like? I mean, how many other trips do you have planned?
We've got two definitive trips planned. Like Kodiak was kind of a big one for us. Yeah. Testing a new product out there, and that was kind of like the culmination of it. We've been working on a specific project for 5 years, and part of that was like working through COVID and stuff like that. But it's something that we've poured our hearts and souls into, and we've done a ton of testing. And that Kodiak trip was kind of like the punctuation mark on like, this boot's done, this thing's ready to rock. And so that was just an incredible opportunity. Now it's time to shift gears and focus on whitetail. And so we're gonna hit Ohio for the second week of November, and we're working on another like pinnacle halo product in that space. that we'll be releasing in 23. Both of these boots are 23 releases for us.
Okay.
So super fired up to kind of get back to the roots there and
Yeah.
chase whitetail around and eat a bunch of snacks in the tree stand. We were joking. I mean, like, we were getting spanked in Kodiak. The tail end of our trip, we started to get some nasty weather. And I mean, what you do is essentially like staying on a boat. We get dropped off on the beach on a skiff every morning. And then you're basically just grinding, 1,000 foot, 1,500 feet, 2,000 feet straight up through some super nasty stuff to get up on top. This early in the year where the bucks are, they haven't had enough snow to push them down low towards the beach yet. So we were grinding to get up top, and you're just like rinse and repeat every day, up the mountain, down the mountain. And so I think it was like the third or fourth day there, Justin and I were kind of like hanging out, eating some snacks, catching our breath halfway up the hill. And I looked at him and I was like, I'm so ready to get into whitetail shape right now. Like, I'm done running around. I'm cold. I'm wet. My feet are sore. Yep. I'm ready to like park it in a blind or a tree stand, a waterfowl blind or a tree stand and hang out and eat some honey buns, man.
Yeah, there you go. Get some Little Debbie's.
Yeah.
It's funny. We had, and I just saw it today. I didn't even tell you. You may have seen it, but we had Taylor Chamberlain on from Hunt Urban, Urban Bowman, if you will.
Yeah.
And of course, he's running around all over the country chasing whitetails. But did you see the video that he just posted today of Hunter?
Yeah.
Hunter literally brought a 9x13 glass baking dish into the tree stand with him and was slicing up. It looked like some type of like cake or something because he's known for
which
like
Hunter
his
is this?
Hunter Rudd.
Hunter Rudd.
Okay.
Does a lot of product
Right.
stuff for him and First Light. And I was like, dude, it's literally a 9x13 baking like glass.
I think at this point, it's like they're doing it for
Oh,
like a meme.
yeah. Because he's known as Mr. Snack Guy. My go-to by far are oatmeal cream pies, man. Like, you got to take them out of the wrapper before you go in. You got to take them out of the wrapper, obviously, because they're super noisy.
Yep.
You can't go wrong with a Pop-Tart either, though. We could do a whole episode on like deer stand snacks. I think that'd be really fun.
Stand snacks, dude.
Stand snacks. Yep. And just have everyone have
it.
a whole bunch of different guests come on and just give us what their stand snack is.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
That would be funny.
you need to talk to Brady Harang at Huntin' Fool. He's like not a whitetail guy, but that kid, every morning that we were running up the mountain in Kodiak, it looked like he was going on a 3-night backpack trip with his food bag.
I love it.
And I'll be darned if he didn't eat all of it by the time he was back to the boat every night. So that kid is like a snack champion.
Dude, we're for sure making this happen now. I can just start visualizing people I need to talk to. We're going to make it happen. Well, sweet, man. We definitely look forward to it. I know you got some secret products, but if you ever need someone to come down and hang out and drink a beer with you, you're looking at 2 of them right here. We're not too far from, I kind of have an idea where you're going from our previous talk, and I think we're only maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours away. So we would more than love to come down and hang out and shoot the shit and, meet Justin and all the crew. So
for sure.
That's all I got for you.
We're excited, man. Really appreciate the opportunities and look forward to connecting with you guys more. We've got a big year coming in front of us, so I'm excited to share it with the world and give you guys some sneak peeks here before things start getting loud and fast for us. So
and we're always looking for product review videos and stuff. We know we're always dropping stuff, especially for the Vance side, and and promoting the products that we carry. And Lacrosse is definitely one of our most popular ones. So. I want to thank you for your time today, Troy, man. We really appreciate you coming on. I know it was an early morning for you over there in the West Coast, but hopefully you got some coffee in you and you're ready to get your day started.
Yep. Greatly appreciate you guys. Greatly appreciate the support from Vance, and we'll be in touch, boys.
All right, everyone, that is all we have for you today. We hope you enjoyed that conversation with Troy. Lacrosse is an iconic footwear brand, and it was super fun to talk about the company's history and share some tips with you on how to get the most from your footwear. As always, we appreciate you listening, and until next time, enjoy the pursuit.